Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Photo Brigade Podcast. I'm Robert Caplin. Good to see you all in Facebook land who are watching on Facebook Live. Today I've got Jonah Markowitz with me. How you doing, Jonah?
I'm doing very well, Robert. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming in. I know we are scrambling today. I was running a little late, so we're scrambling to get this podcast started. But Jonah was on a recent panel of ours. It was which one was it? It was the visual storytelling?
The sensitive storytelling.
Sensitive storytelling panel.
Joint Viewfind and you guys, Photo Brigade.
So you are a contributing photographer with Viewfind.
I am indeed.
You received a grant from them.
I did. I got one of their grants. When was it? I don't know. Not too long ago. One of the grants for stories on race.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And we're going to get more into that here in a little bit, but a lot of the work that you do revolves around telling stories about race and communities and so on. So before we get started, I just want to say thanks to Adorama for letting us host here in the event space here. Check them out, adorama.com/events for all of their other stuff. Thank you to Canon Professional Services for your support, and also Temba Bags. Lastly, I just want to make sure that you are following all of our social media at Photo Brigade on basically everything. We are taking over Snapchat, Instagram stories, sharing pictures and photos from our friends who are at the Olympics right now in Rio. So make sure to follow us on all those different social platforms. So with no further ado, we'll get back to you. Let's jump in. I'm going to jump in, and we have kind of a gallery of portraits and sort of a general gallery of photos that'll give people an idea of the sort of work that you do. But as we go through this gallery, let's talk about your background and how you got into the world of photography.
Sure. So it's a little bit of a roundabout way, I suppose. I graduated from college, came back to New York, and was working full-time for a research foundation. Didn't study photography in college or anything like that.
Really?
I was doing air pollution research for 3 years, saving up some cash with traveling in mind, basically. And
Air pollution research.
And
what does that involve?
It's actually it's a monitoring study in New York City. So there's there's I think now about 150 locations where they monitor for air quality.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and they built a pollution map of New York City.
Are these those machines that you see in the subways that are constantly? Or is that kind of
that's probably maybe, but that's through the DEC, I believe.
Okay.
So not necessarily the same thing, but similar.
Right.
Anyway, so I worked there for 3 years, saved up some cash, all in the hopes of going to travel. And while I was there, I met photography again. I guess I took a couple photo classes, and so that sort of ignited my passion again. And then when I was saved up enough money to travel, got myself a nice little D700 and hit the road with it. And so I was in Southeast Asia for 10 months, traveling, shooting every day, sort of honing my skills, figuring out hey, this is something that I could see myself doing.
Right.
It checks off all the stuff that I'm really interested in. Right. It's like traveling, meeting new people, not being in an office, being in the streets, and learning every day from the people, the experiences, what have you. So that's how I came back after those 10 months and said, you know what, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make a go at it.
Right.
So never went back to full time. Still living that life now. It's treated me well.
That's how long has it been?
It's been about 5 years.
5 years as a freelancer.
4 years as a freelancer, yeah.
And you didn't really get any formal training in it or anything? You just sort of just started shooting.
Yeah, just started shooting. Like I said, I took a couple classes at Queens College when I was working there.
Did you see that you had the skill to be a photographer? I mean, you kind of thrust right into it. I mean,
yeah.
And I mean, a lot of photographers that are in the business now doing what you do,
sure,
have a background,
sure,
4-year college or a couple-year college or some sort of.
Sure. I mean, maybe it was a little naive at the time, but it is what it is. It's been the best decision I think I've ever made.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've taken some classes at ICP over the years. But yeah, I just sort of dove right in. Initially, a lot of the paid work that I was getting was video work. I had a buddy who owned a production company doing documentary branded doc content, web content, and so a lot of the work I was getting was video stuff.
Video stuff. Okay, so that's another thing that we're going to get into is the video work that you do, which is what kind of clients do you work with on video? Mostly?
Video, basically all sort of throughout the spectrum. I've worked for, in one way or another, I've worked for Vice, Vogue, Budweiser.
From Vice to Vogue.
Vice to Vogue, exactly.
The V's,
exactly,
yeah, very nice.
I mean, a lot. Budweiser, all kinds of places, and it's a healthy mix of some more commercial stuff, some branded content stuff, and some straight doc content. So,
do you prefer
TV,
one more than the other? Or?
Yeah, I prefer straight doc work.
Video work or stills?
I enjoy both of them. They each have their merits, and I think they each should be used in certain places. And I think each medium should be used for what it is. And they're not interchangeable. You can't stick photos in a slideshow with music or audio and call it video or call it true sort of multimedia visual work. It just doesn't really work like that. Right. So each piece should include the medium that suits it, right? And that's what I'm doing more of now. And a lot of my personal work has been stills driven, but now I'm introducing video in ways that they complement and fills out the piece properly.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Hey guys. All right. So let's jump into so last time you were here as part of the panel with Viewfind.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk a little bit more about that aspect of your career and
Sure.
and how you're using this grant and the collaboration with them?
Sure. So the collaboration with Viewfind came around a piece that I have been working on since late 2014 called 3 Bags Full.
Do we have that story here?
We do have that.
Let's jump into that
sure.
real quick while we're talking about it. 3 Bags Full. So much for chronological. Sorry about that.
So it's a piece about this kid Tavares Sanders and his journey from the south side of Chicago, foster home in the south side of Chicago, to Connecticut College.
Okay.
And basically, it chronicles what are the cultural barriers, what are the academic barriers, what are the social barriers to mobility, like the true sort of barriers to mobility in America, and that's racial, cultural, academic, and that's all found in his life by trying to fit in at a elite liberal arts school. So that's the heart of the piece is that, and so here he's back in Chicago with some of his high school friends. Those are his high school friends in the background shooting a hip hop video, and it's very clear. It becomes more and more clear every time he goes back how different their lives have become.
Yeah. And how did you? So maybe you said this already, but did you start the project before the grant or? Yeah.
I started the project well before the grant.
But you're continuing this project with the grant money.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm continuing the project. This edit right now is one that I got the grant with. Since then, the newer piece is, 30-40% new, and there's a multimedia component of video.
Oh, cool.
Where it fits, right? Where it fits the story. And so that's not quite ready to be put out yet, but it will be.
Very cool.
Soon enough, yeah.
How important are grants? I've never personally received a grant or even applied for a grant, but and I know we talked about it on our previous panel a bit. But how important would you say are grants to photographers like yourself? Is this the first grant you've had, or have you done many?
This is the first grant that I've had. I would say that grants are extremely important now. I mean, with editorial rates plummeting, how else do you fund long-term meaningful work, right? I mean, how can you so that's grants, as far as I'm concerned, should be in the mix for every photographer looking to publish, looking to fund long-term projects. And this was published in a couple of different places, and it doesn't even meet the cost. Doesn't even come close to meeting the cost of what I laid out.
Yeah.
So the grant is instrumental. I mean, the grant allowed me to work on it longer. And it wasn't a huge grant, but it helps. And it's all a mix between the publications and the grant and all those things, and you start to recoup your money a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And it also lets you do more, like you said, you're doing some video work with this project as well now that maybe you didn't have. But I mean, that is the problem with journalism these days, is there, like, in order to do these long-term projects, especially if you're not affiliated with a publications that's going to pay you a day rate for every day you're doing something, I mean, how do you do these projects? Do people do these projects anymore?
I mean, a lot of people do them on spec. A lot of people do them because they're passion projects.
Yeah.
And
was this a passion project for you?
Yeah, it certainly started that way, and it still is. I mean, it still is. It still is. There's no like economic justification for what for doing a project for years.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a passion project first and foremost.
Do you have a particular goal in mind for? Or okay, let me back up. So Viewfind gives you this grant money, and what are their expectations?
I mean, their expectations are that I continue to work sort of with the same resolve that I've been working it, and that they want to, they want me to be able to continue to fund working on it.
And then they help publish and get it out there in some capacity?
Well, we haven't gotten to that point yet because I'm
still working on it.
Finishing up. Yeah, there's the video section needs to be cut, and some audio stuff needs to be cut, and so on and so forth. But we'll see. I guess.
Do they have any part in the creative process, or it's just sort of or editing? Like, do they give you feedback and stuff? Or?
They haven't had that big of a hand in that at this point. I think. I mean, I haven't reached out to them and showed them edits and done that stuff. So that if I were to do that, they probably would be receptive. But haven't done that yet.
Yeah. Are you your own edit? Like, do you have anybody else ever look through and help you edit? Because
yeah. Sitting right up here. Yeah, no, I got good friends, and I have friends that are editors and people that help me out, and people who believe in the work, and people who I would happy to edit their work whenever they want to reach out. So yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Before we jump into your next project,
sure.
You're living in Brooklyn now, and you're from Brooklyn.
Always, yeah. Born and raised in Brooklyn. I've escaped a couple different times. One for college, one to Southeast Asia, obviously traveling and that kind of stuff. But I always
make your way back.
Pulling me back in.
Yeah. You were in LA for your. Where were you for your?
No, never been to LA actually.
Oh, okay. Where were you for college? Sorry.
I was in upstate New York.
Oh, upstate New York.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Sorry. God, I'm getting everyone mixed up these days. So
we all look alike. Bunch of white
all you photographers look
photographers
alike.
out here. Yeah.
Totally. So how have you found the freelance life in New York? I mean, as a journalist and
yeah, I mean it's a grind, man. It's a hustle. It's not like there's this romantic notion that like, oh, you can be your own boss and just get out of here whenever you want, and it must be lovely. And that's all the people that work 9 to 5 that say that, because when you're hustling and trying to get that work, you can't leave, because the people that just got you work, they'll forget about you in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So in some ways it's even more sort of constricting. But in other ways, at the end of the day, I can go whenever I want. And I can potentially pick up work wherever I go. Right? It's a trade. It's a skill. It's like if I have contacts and I say, listen, I'm going to be in the Philippines, hopefully I can pick up some work.
Yeah.
We'll see. We're going to test that theory out pretty soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully.
So what's your usual route to, so say you're going to go to the Philippines, you just start letting all the clients you've ever worked with know, you put it out on Facebook that you're going there.
Yeah.
Is that
sure.
basically the
Yeah, I
trick,
guess, and
or?
things like, and apps like Blink.
Blink, right? Yeah.
Yeah, or
has that been successful for you, Blink?
Yes.
I've
and
heard
no.
people with mixed reviews. It
Yes
just
and
depends
no.
on how much you use it.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I don't use it all that often.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm up there. But there's a portfolio of mine up there.
And for those that don't know, Blink is an app that basically tells editors and so on where you are in the world, so that if something happens or is going on near you, geographically near you, they can just kind of call on you and say, hey, we got something for you. But I've heard, friends of mine like Mark Kozlerich, he said that he basically started working. He got his connection with the New York Times by being, in the middle of nowhere on Blink.
Sure.
And it, kind of led to all sorts of things, including an internship.
Sure. I mean, I think, let me say this. I think at its core, I think Blink is a really good thing for the industry.
Yeah.
I think the day of crusading white journalists telling other people's stories should be over and is dying. And for good reason. I mean, I think an app like Blink, where you can see who's there and who has a portfolio that knows the country, knows the cultural norms, they're the best people to tell those stories.
Right.
Right. So in theory, I mean, I think it's great. In practice, I think I'm sure it'll work out.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exciting. So let's jump into this story here.
Sure.
And give me a little background and walk me through it.
So this is a story about Frankie the Fish Colton, and he was one of the few remaining commercial fishermen in the Rockaways. Still is down there. He lost his house and most of his business to Hurricane Sandy. Mm-hmm. And so this story follows him trying to kind of pick up the pieces.
You also did video work on this, I was right?
Yeah, I did video work, but the video work that I did, and this was a pretty long time ago now, it's 4 or 5 years ago now. Mm-hmm. The video work that I did was fine for then. It's not fine for now.
Oh, okay.
That is a slideshow with video elements and audio, and that my philosophy has changed.
Yeah, as you were saying earlier.
Yeah, my philosophy towards video has changed. It's not something you can just throw together and call it multimedia work.
Right. Where did you learn to? Let's go back on here. We'll talk about video more later. So Frankie with the Fish, was it?
Yeah, Frank the Fish.
Frank the Fish. Yeah. Nice.
Yep. That's him right there.
So how much time did you spend with this fella?
I spent a lot of time with him. He's a good dude.
I mean, do you spend with most of your projects? It's not. I mean, there are some people that do a project and they spend one day. They shoot for a newspaper. They just do a day in the life of sort of thing. This is much more.
This is the way that I like to work, right? Because I like to develop real relationships. I can't tell anybody's story. They can't trust me, give me the privilege of telling their story without me having a real meaningful relationship with them. Yeah. And I think that can be true in a day in the life work. Also, it's just a shallower relationship. Uh-huh. So yeah, I spent off and on. I was visiting him for over a year probably.
A year total.
Yeah. And I think it's important that there's a lot of ways to sort of judge a photographer. Obviously, visually, strength of stories and all that stuff. But I think one of the important ways that isn't necessarily talked about is we should judge photographers based on the relationships that they have with their subjects. Yeah. And how long and how meaningful those relationships are, and whether they still continue, or whether you're the kind of person that gets what sort of extracts what they need and then burns bridges, because that's tremendously important. And you're not going to get empathy. You're not going to get true storytelling from someone who's sort of extracting these frames, these whatever you want to, photographs from a situation that doesn't, sort of care deeply about what's going on.
Wow, I think that's great. Did you find that did it take you time to really get into that, get those empathetic photos? You know what I mean? Get these photos that really tell the story because of the time you spent, or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, listen, Frank is working class fisherman dude, no messing around, Rockaways, that's his van, and that thing, there's fish scales everywhere. I mean, it's no joke. So for me, I mean, I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, but look at this shirt. Look at this hair. I'm very far removed from the life of,
this guy,
and that's part of the reason why I keep coming back to Brooklyn, because there's so many opportunities.
Yeah.
But I had, he didn't trust me off the bat. I mean, there were so many people down there in Sandy, in the days and the weeks following, sort of doing what I'm talking about, mining what they can out of the situation and then moving on. And I think that's where this kind of long form, non-reductive work is super important. And all the other stuff, all the video, all the web content, all the commercial stuff, all that other work that I'm putting in is to fuel pieces like this, because this is the real work. And it's a shame. It's a real shame that we haven't figured out a way to support meaningful long-term storytelling monetarily, because people really enjoy it. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the next, like, we're talking about documentary branded content, all that stuff being the next wave of sort of a way for documentary filmmakers and photographers to make a living. People really enjoy long-term work. It's like when you put yourself into a piece, it's very obvious when the piece comes out whether somebody has really thrown themselves in.
Did this story get published anywhere in particular, or is this?
Yeah, this ran in Sunday Review, New York Times.
Oh wow, nice. Good reception, I imagine.
Yeah,
They get a good spread.
It was. It ran along with a narrative written by Paul Greenberg, as told by Frank the Fish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was like kind of the story. It ran on the anniversary of Sandy, the 1-year anniversary of Sandy.
Oh, okay, yeah. Sandy, it's interesting. Sandy brings a lot of people together in weird ways. If I hadn't have gone out to take just a couple pictures outside of my house, I wouldn't have met like 3 people that are now integral in my life in different ways. It's a wild thing. Okay, so let's maybe move to this one. Before we get to this one, you mentioned this last Frank the Fish. You do all your other work to support to be able to do that kind of work. So, do you basically only take journalistic work? Do you do other work on the side to would you shoot a wedding? Do you you know what I mean? Like, do you do that kind of stuff to fund your projects?
No, I don't shoot weddings.
Don't call him for weddings.
Yeah, unless the price is right.
Exactly.
No, I don't really shoot weddings. I've shot a couple as a favor to friends, but
Sure,
I don't really shoot weddings. I do some like more commercial video stuff. I will do more commercial still stuff when it pops up.
So the idea is maybe doing more commercial work.
Well, the true idea is to blend the two of them.
Right.
Which is to say, listen, documentary work is really powerful. People will like documentary work. It moves people because there's a lot of, when done the right way, there's a lot of empathy. There can be a lot of empathy. There can be a lot of feeling. There can be a lot of emotion in it. And how can we use that emotion to tell real branded content pieces also?
Right.
So that's the direction I'm moving.
Yeah.
The commercial work is fine, and I put everything I got into the commercial work. I never I go hard on everything that I'm doing.
Sure.
But the commercial work is a means to an end, more or less.
Yeah.
And so the end goal, I would say, is branded content work that can support true documentary long-term pieces.
Really cool.
Because other people aren't figuring out the issue.
Uh-huh.
You can't wait for the market to figure out how to support passion pieces. The market's not going to figure that out because it's not in the market's best interest. People are doing them anyway.
Yeah.
I'm still doing them.
Right. They'll do it anyway.
There's no shortage of them. People are still shooting them because
it's actually an interesting thing you say, because it's like, if you go to a news outlet and say, hey, I'm working on this passion project, I'd like to go here, they can just say, we'll pass, show it to us when it's done. Right?
Sure, of course, and that happens all the time. But there are also editors. There are also editors and people who support those projects by saying okay, and I was talking with a couple of friends of mine the other week, and it was a very good editor who said that they specifically assign photographers based on personal work so that they can at least pay for the travel to get them out there.
Yeah.
And then they can continue, they can shoot the piece, and they're going to shoot the piece well because they do what they do. They're not sending them there out of pity or sympathy they're sending them there because they're going to shoot the piece well, but they can also work on personal work. So there are ways to bridge the gap.
Right. Well, it's an editor thing, There are some editors that will.
It's an editor thing.
I mean, I've had editors that will. I've had editors that will basically just try to get you down to the lowest number as possible to try to prove to their boss they can cut costs, and then you've got the editors who get it, who maybe were photographers at one point, or who want to help promote people's projects.
There's photographers that get it and don't get it too. It's not editors. It's a human thing. I mean, that's everybody, right? But yes, there are There are people who it's a business first sort of mindset, and the work will suffer because they won't pay a certain rate, or because they won't fly people somewhere, or because they can't pay the right person to tell that story, and the work will suffer because of it. But yeah, there are a lot of people who are doing the right thing also.
Yeah.
Shout out to my editors.
Editors, we love you.
Gotta put them in there.
Okay, so let's move on to this next story that you have here.
Yeah.
Hit me.
Okay, so this is a story called Princess to Queen, and funny, we were just talking about that. I was sent to India to do a documentary video piece, and that's how I made my way over there. And while I was there, I was traveling, trying to figure out a story to tell, and I was really grappling with the thing that I was talking about before, which is like the white man sort of crusader, like vestiges of colonialism, like us going and being the right person to tell a story.
Right.
And it's never true. So I was traveling and looking for stories, shooting all the time, mostly street work, whatever else, portraiture. And then I got to Bangalore, and I spent a while in Bangalore, and I started to see the difference between Bangalore and the other places I had traveled in India. And what was very evident there was this Western influence, because a lot of the companies who need to outsource various things are looking to Bangalore, right? So it's a tech hub of India. That Western influence has had really a big influence on societal norms and relationships there. And so I decided to shoot a piece, an ongoing piece about how Western influence affects the sexual violence, not sexual violence, but domestic violence and violence against women in India. What part do Western companies who come in like this, for example,
perfect,
Axe, who comes in and puts these callous billboards up, when Indian society does not, rightfully or wrongfully, does not promote this sort of liberal sexuality.
Right.
That's not available, right? So it's a combination of a lot of things, but one is a lot of the new economy in India, fueled by Western companies, is in cities. So you have a lot of the men coming from rural India coming into these cities. You have cities that are disproportionately male, sexually frustrated, disproportionately male, extreme poverty, treated in brutal ways by the government and by these companies, and and then it becomes this tinderbox that spills over in horrible ways, like completely horrible ways. If we go back, I mean, this girl right here was forced into marriage after being raped, and she was, because there's basically no other option, she was like, sort of tainted in a way that was not acceptable to marry anybody else. So she was forced to marry the person who raped her, and that's part of the reason that the man raped her to begin with. Because she refused to marry him in the first place. She was like 13 at the time. Her mother, and then at 17, she was doused in kerosene and lit on fire by her mother-in-law after a long sort of abusive relationship. And it's very easy to immediately brutalize the man and the mother-in-law who are in this position. It's harder to take a step back and look at what are the issues that put both of them in that situation. And that by no means is this any kind of excuse for the man. That's not not at all what I'm saying. But we have to look at the reality of what are the things that that cause this, the economic reality, the social reality. And so I bit off a big piece to do. I wasn't able to finish it while I was there, so it's still ongoing. I'm waiting for a ride back to India somehow, some way. I may have to stow away one of these days, but but yeah, and so it's also this is a good piece in terms of my approach to storytelling. Also, not being reductive, not hitting some soundbite, not being able to consume a piece in 3 minutes or 2.5 minutes.
Second time looking at this photo, I'm just seeing the guy up here looking down. Man, that's a great shot.
Thank you. So it's not done yet because we're not there. This is one of these photographs. that illustrate sort of the brutalization of men and women who live on pennies a day. And this piece was really difficult for me because it made me confront a lot of the things that I don't like about some of the photography work out there. One is sort of poverty porn, taking advantage without empathy, sort of extracting those images and moving on. But all of those pieces are pieces of this project. Those that could be theoretically pieces of these projects. So it really challenged me to come at it a different way. And one of the things that I thought would let me tell this story is at least I can see the Western influence. I don't pretend to be an expert on Indian culture. Although I was there for 4 months, I learned what little I could. But I don't pretend to be an expert. I am an expert in Western culture and what we have here, right? The liberalized sexual dating, Tinder, swiping right, all that, which is completely on the other side. But that's where this sort of chaos is hitting, and of course the people who are treated the worst out of it are the people who are the most vulnerable. And in Indian society, that's women, and that's poorer women.
How did you, when you went and made these photos and with the purpose of this story, obviously, did you have a translator with you? Did the subjects necessarily know what you were doing? I imagine that's kind of a hard thing to tell all these people I saw as we went through.
So the first thing I did was found a local nonprofit in Bangalore called Vimochana, who has been doing this work for decades, and I had to really work my ass off to convince them that I was worthwhile, that I could tell the story in a way that was not some sort of reductionist, poorly told story from a intrepid white man coming to tackle this.
Sure.
So it took me a long time, but basically, long story short, every one of those women, everybody who I shot with a representative from Vimochana, was set up through Vimochana.
Okay.
So I didn't have any fixer per se, but they opened all the doors for me.
Right.
And they were opening just listening to them. They were the ones telling the story. I was the vehicle. In so much as I could go and make the pictures, and I can go and do some of the audio recordings, but they were the ones who were telling the story. It wasn't me.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I think that a lot of photographers need to hear you and be aware of all of these issues that are going on, and the sort of like you said, going in and covering a story, extracting the photos, and being aware of,
Yeah. I think the industry is changing slowly.
Yeah,
but
slowly.
There's a real issue with the diversity of voices who are telling these stories. It's still really poorly represented.
I agree.
And I struggle with that. I struggle with that because what can I do as a photographer? What can I do to change that when I'm if you look at sort of my scorecard or my stats, I'm a part of the problem, right? White, 6'5" man, I'm a part of the problem. But recognizing that is what made me search deeper for how I can be aware of the privilege that exists, use that privilege that exists in ways to undermine that privilege. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's refreshing to hear all that. It really is. So much so. Okay, so let's jump into just a couple just sort of businessy sort of deals, as that's what we talk about here. Earlier, you and I were talking about social media a little bit, and some people use it in different ways. You have a Facebook business photography page. You have your personal page. I believe you're on Instagram.
I am indeed. Yeah, Jonah Markowitz, in case anyone was wondering.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll put that in the caption below.
Appreciate that.
Give him a follow. And so now there's these new mediums that are coming up, like Snapchat and Instagram stories. And we were just talking about, and you said that you weren't so much into that
Yeah, mode. I've never downloaded Snapchat. I mean, Instagram stories seems like just a ripoff of Snapchat.
Oh, it is.
So I just like, social media is like on the forefront of where I'm confused about business and pleasure. Because here's the Instagram. It's a curated feed, curated by none other, and it's there and it's up all the time. So if I don't put a serious amount of work into what that feed looks like, then that's not fair to my career. That's not fair in representing who I am. That being said, then it feels like a chore. Then it feels like I need to it seeps into my personal workflow, because a lot of the stuff that I'm shooting that I put up on my Instagram are not like long-term stories. They're street photography that I do in New York City or whatever else. And then it almost takes away some of the fun of just shooting for myself in street photography and that kind of stuff. That being said, I'm on Instagram. I do enjoy it as a medium. I do like following people around, seeing what they're putting up, seeing what they're working on. But it's a tough thing for me personally to manage.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Do you see it as a good promotion tool for yourself? I mean, like, the thing that I personally find so great about social media for photographers is the ability to say, like, oh wow, I've seen now that this these editors have not only seen, but they like the photos. They're it's constantly keeping me on the top of their,
Sure, and
has it worked for you at all in that way?
I've never gotten an assignment off an Instagram post.
Do you know that though?
Yeah, I do know that, because all the assignments that I've gotten have been through personal relationships, more or less, through people that I meet, through people that I'm pitching, through people that I'm showing my work. And maybe that would be different if I were to have more of a presence on Instagram. So, like, which came first, my issues with putting the content out, or the fact that I don't have very many followers. But I'm gonna continue doing what's worked well for me. For people who have huge social media followings and that's how they disseminate work, I get it. There are people who do amazing work on Instagram. Ruddy Roy, for example, amazing work. Yeah. I follow his feed; it's brilliant. But that's just not the way that I like to disseminate work. I like to do longer-term narratives and think more about the sort of tighter edit and how I weave the story. And it's not a larger daily thing. Right. It's just not how I work. For Ruddy, that's how he works, and it works for him. It's a beautiful way to put his work out. And if he were up here, he'd be telling you he got a ton of work from Instagram. I'm sure. But it's just not how I've gotten most of my work.
But admittedly, you would like more followers.
Dude, don't even get me started with Instagram followers. It's such a zero-sum game. It's like it's so ridiculous. Sure, I would like more followers because I would like more people to see my work, because I happen to believe in my work. But the question is, what are you willing to do for that? Are you willing to pay for those? Are you willing to put yourself out there as the dude that has 35,000 followers and then you get 25 likes on a picture? Like, that would never be me. And so yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
That's where I'm willing to go with Instagram, and I do see its merits, and I do use it, and I do enjoy it. It's just it's a struggle for me to balance.
And I think when you say Instagram, it's sort of social as a whole, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
We're not just
focusing
on
Sorry,
Instagram.
Not just focusing on you.
Yeah. I don't want their lawyers calling me or anything.
Right.
And then. What's next? Like you mentioned you're trying to get back to India. You've got a project that you're working on. Where was it that you said?
Well, I'm still working on 3 Bags Full. I'm working on another project that I'm pitching right now, so I can't really talk about that yet. But it'll be out in the next month and a half for sure. Okay. And what's next beyond that is doing more video work.
Pull up a video here.
I'm doing my own sort of branded content studio work for nonprofits, for companies. This is a piece that I shot with Keith Omont, who directed it, and I did a little bit of camera work on it. But this style of documentary work is real work, and it pays.
So, for instance, this was on Leather Jackets. Was this a journalistic or a more commercial piece?
Oh, this is 100% commercial.
100% commercial.
Yeah, I like how I confused those two right there.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's not confuse them. This was 100% commercial.
Advertorial?
Yeah, I guess. Except I don't know any real editorial outlets that would pick this up. But,
right. But basically,
it's shot it's shot in kind of a stylized documentary
fashion.
Way.
Yeah.
So that's what This doesn't really blend the two worlds all that much, other than it sort of visually almost looks doc. I mean, it's a kind of run and gun style. The other piece that's on my website, if you want to pull the other video up, is a video that I shot for a nonprofit, which told a real story about one of their kids. It's called the Beyond Sports Foundation. They work with kids who are D1, who are going to be D1 athletes, more or less. They're going to get a scholarship for some sport, and so I worked with them.
Apparently the internet seems to be down.
No, it's right here. This is it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I guess
Yeah,
I already downloaded that
sometimes it
sucker.
just works out.
I downloaded that sucker already.
So this is more a truthful blend between documentary work. The storytelling approach was documentary. I told this kid's story in his own words, and then I added some other stuff, some more branded stuff like this that fit a sort of social media campaign that we were working on with them. So this talk about future. This is the way that I'm branding myself.
Cool. Yeah.
As a capable photographer and cinematographer who can do the entire project. Filmmaker. Exactly. Got me.
And what would you say is your percentage? So, in terms of your income, comes from editorial work versus the more commercial work. Is it very lopsided one way or the other?
It's not terribly lopsided. It depends on the month, depends on the 6 months. I would say it's probably 40% editorial, 60%. Sort of, and it depends on how you decide to make that split, right? So is this commercial work, or is this? I mean, if you're doing nonprofit photo work, would you call that commercial? I don't know.
Well, that particular one, obviously, was...
The shot was commercial. The shot Leathers was commercial. That one is, it's for a nonprofit. But if you're shooting for, I don't know, if you're shooting for the UN and wherever,
well, I mean...
Where's that line?
I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, you work for the New York Times, you get a $200 day rate to shoot something for the day. If you shoot, say, something for... I don't have any clue what you shot that other thing for, but a commercial job, maybe you get 10, 20 times as much money.
So it's much easier. Yeah, it's much easier for the editorial side to get smaller and smaller as you pick up other work. But I do shoot for the New York Times and Newsday out in Long Island, doing still stuff. So editorial is a part of my mix.
Right. Do you do a lot more editorial though?
What do you mean?
Than commercial?
No, I don't do a lot more. I would say it's a pretty even split. And commercial includes branded content, documentary work, and also like, so where would you when I DP a show for a documentary for a TV network, that doesn't fit into this paradigm of commercial or editorial, right? Yeah. So where does that fit in? When I shoot, like last year, I shot on a film called Keepers of the Game, premiered at Tribeca. I was a camera operator on that film. Where does that fit into commercial editorial?
Right.
It's just it's a mix. It's a whole mix. I don't really know how you'd make a living now and feel comfortable about your freelance job security over the next 10 years if you don't have a healthy mix of what you're doing.
I agree with you completely, especially here in New York City. I mean, when I first started, there were a lot there. Maybe there still are, but there were a lot of photographers that worked strictly as a freelancer for the New York Times or strictly for whatever outlet it is, and you add up a maximum amount of money that they could make if they worked every day of the week, and it's barely enough to make it by here in the city.
Sure.
And I think that goes almost with any. I mean, there are some exceptions. There's some magazines that pay well, and
but those assignments are few and far between, and there's people shooting them. There's people with those with those connections.
People got those gigs, yeah.
Yeah,
And it just becomes how do you work your way and diversify not only your journalism clients but commercial and
how can you monetize your talent?
Right.
To do the real journalistic long form work, how can you monetize your talent?
Right. Well, cool. Unless there's any questions that we've missed or anything, or anyone who wants to ask anything, I think that we've gotten through our podcast all right. That wasn't too bad, was it?
Not at all.
Not at all.
No,
all right.
Let's do it again tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll do too.
All right.
So thank you, Jonah, for joining. Thanks, everybody on Facebook and YouTubes and the internets for tuning in. And please be sure to subscribe to our social media, to Jonah's social media. We'll put this
updated
below.
all the time.
What was your social?
Jonah Markowitz is my Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah.
With a Z.
Markowitz with a Z. That's true.
And
thank you to everybody who came and showed up today.
Yeah, thanks for everyone.
Packed house.
We packed it.
Very much appreciated.
And thanks again to Adorama, Canon Professional Services, Temba Bags, and of course to Jonah. Take care. We'll see you all again next time.